I've always prided myself on being a rational person, working the late shift at ST. Mary's hospital was usually peaceful. The quiet allowed me to focus on my tasks without interruptions. But one night, something happened that shattered my sense of normalcy and left me questioning everything I thought I knew. It started with a flicker at the edge of my vision. I was walking down the long, dimly lit hallway on the 4th floor when I saw a shadowy figure, barely visible. Drifting just out of reach, I stopped, squinting into the darkness, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination brought on by fatigue. But as the night wore on, I saw it again. This time, I was sure it was real. The figure moved with an eerie grace, gliding through the hallway with purpose. My heart pounded as I decided to follow it. The figure led me to an old wing of the hospital, a section that had been closed off for years due to never-completed renovations. The air grew colder as I approached, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. I hesitated at the threshold, but curiosity, and something else I couldn't quite name, compelled me forward. The figure stopped in front of a door and turned towards me. In the dim light, I could make out the features of a woman, her face pale and eyes hollow with sorrow. She was dressed in a nurse's uniform, but it was unlike any I'd ever seen. The style was outdated, from decades past. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She didn't respond, just raised a hand and pointed to the door. Gathering my courage, I pushed the door open. Inside, I found an old hospital room, frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture and outdated medical equipment filled the space. On the bed lay a journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. I picked it up, my hands shaking. The journal belonged to Nurse Evelyn, who had mysteriously disappeared 50 years ago. Her last entry was a desperate warning. "He is not of this world. He must never be released." As I read, the temperature in the room plummeted. The ghostly nurse appeared beside me, her eyes filled with a silent plea. My breath caught in my throat as the realization hit me. This wasn't just a restless spirit seeking closure. Something far more sinister was at play, and it was my duty to stop it. Just as I resolved to act, the door slammed shut behind me. The ghostly figure faded, leaving me alone in the oppressive darkness. A cold, malevolent presence filled the room, and I knew I had to find a way out before it was too late. I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in as I felt the walls closing in. Suddenly, I heard a whisper, Nurse Evelyn's voice, guiding me to a hidden latch. With trembling hands, I pulled it, and a secret passageway opened. I fled down the dark corridor, the malevolent presence hot on my heels. As I emerged into the main hallway, the oppressive cold lifted, and I knew I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. The hospital's forgotten wing held dark secrets, and I vowed to uncover the truth about what had happened to Nurse Evelyn and the entity she had warned about. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The hospital was haunted, not just by restless spirits, but by a darkness that refused to be banished, and I was the only one who could stop it. The night shift at Mercy General was usually uneventful, but that all changed the moment I stepped into room 213. I had been assigned to check on Mr. Johnson, a patient with no known relatives or visitors. His case was peculiar, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found that night. The door to room 213 was slightly ajar, and a strange flickering light emanated from within. I pushed it open and was immediately struck by the eerie scene before me. The room was bathed in the flickering light of numerous candles, their flames casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Strange symbols, drawn in what looked like blood, covered every surface. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs and something far more unsettling. My heart raced as I stepped inside. The symbols were unlike anything I had ever seen, and the candles seemed to be arranged in some sort of ritualistic pattern. In the center of the room lay Mr. Johnson, unconscious and surrounded by more symbols. His face was pale and his breathing shallow. Desperate to understand what was happening, I reached for the notebook on the bedside table. It was filled with writings about dark rituals and summoning spells. The last page was a hastily scrawled note. The ritual must be completed. The darkness demands a sacrifice. Before I could react, The candles extinguished simultaneously, plunging the room into darkness. A cold, malevolent presence filled the air, and I felt as if unseen eyes were watching my every move. I fled the room, my mind reeling with questions. Who was Mr. Johnson really? And what dark forces had I inadvertently stumbled upon? The next day, I returned to room 213 with the hospital's chief of security. The room was empty, the symbols and candles gone. It was as if the previous night's horrors had been a figment of my imagination, but I knew what I had seen, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening within the walls of Mercy General. Determined to find answers, I began to investigate Mr. Johnson's background. My search led me to an old, abandoned library on the outskirts of town. There, amidst dusty tomes and forgotten manuscripts, I found records of a cult that had once operated in the area. Their rituals were designed to summon and bind dark entities, demanding human sacrifices in exchange for power. As I delved deeper, I uncovered a chilling connection. Mr. Johnson had been a member of this cult, seeking refuge in the hospital to escape their grasp, but the cult had found him, and their rituals had followed. The symbols and candles were part of an unfinished ceremony, one that had drawn the attention of something truly malevolent. My hands trembled as I realized the full extent of the danger. The ritual was incomplete, and the dark entity was still seeking its sacrifice. I returned to the hospital, my mind racing with fear and determination. I had to stop whatever was happening to save not only Mr. Johnson but everyone at Mercy General. That night, I gathered a group of trusted colleagues and explained the situation. We prepared ourselves, armed with knowledge and a plan to confront the darkness. As midnight approached, we entered room 213, the air thick with anticipation and dread. The room was empty, but the sense of foreboding was palpable. We began our own ritual, one designed to banish the dark entity and break the cult's hold. The air grew colder, and shadows seemed to writhe around us. Just as we reached the climax of our incantation, the candles in the room reignited, their flames burning with unnatural intensity. A deafening roar filled the air, and a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. We stood our ground, chanting the final words of our banishment spell. The figure recoiled, its form flickering and fading. With a final agonizing scream, the entity dissipated, and the room fell silent. The oppressive cold lifted, and we knew we had succeeded. But as I looked around, I saw the fear and exhaustion in my colleagues' eyes. The darkness was gone, but the memory of that night would haunt us forever. Mercy General returned to its usual routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only scratched the surface of the horrors that lurked within its walls. The cult's influence ran deep, and I knew that more dark secrets awaited discovery. But for now, we had won a small victory, and I vowed to remain vigilant, ready to face whatever came next. I've always been a skeptic, someone who relies on facts and logic, but what I experienced one stormy night at Riverdale Hospital changed everything I believed. It was a night shift like any other, or so I thought until I passed by room 407. It started as a faint whisper, barely audible over the howling wind outside. I paused, straining to hear. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, seeming to come from within the room. My rational mind dismissed it as the wind, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door, expecting to find a draft or some other logical explanation. The room was empty, just as it should have been. But the whispers didn't stop. They seemed to be coming from all around me, echoing off the walls. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, scanning the room for any source of the sound. There was nothing. No open windows, no hidden speakers, nothing that could explain the eerie whispers. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was just my imagination, but the whispers persisted, growing louder and more coherent. They seemed to be calling my name, urging me to come closer. Following the sound, I was led to an old storage room at the end of the hallway. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with old hospital records and dusty equipment. The whispers intensified, forming coherent words. "Help us." My hands trembled as I turned on the light, illuminating a scene that sent chills down my spine. In the corner of the room, Partially hidden under a pile of forgotten files was an old, leather-bound diary. It belonged to a nurse named Margaret, who had worked at Riverdale in the 1920s. Her final entries spoke of patients disappearing and strange occurrences during the night shifts. She mentioned hearing whispers, just like I was experiencing now. Her last entry was a chilling warning. The spirits of the lost seek justice. They are trapped, and they need our help to find peace. My skepticism shattered as I realized the whispers were real. The spirits of the patients who had disappeared were reaching out, seeking justice. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the hospital's archives, searching for any records of the missing patients. What I found was horrifying. The patients had been part of unethical experiments conducted by a doctor obsessed with the supernatural. His experiments had gone horribly wrong, trapping the patients' souls in a limbo between life and death. The whispers were their desperate pleas for release. Armed with this knowledge, I knew I had to act. I reached out to a local paranormal investigator, someone who could help me perform a ritual to free the trapped souls. Together, we gathered the necessary materials and prepared ourselves for the task ahead. As we began the ritual, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. The room filled with a cold, oppressive energy, and shadows danced on the walls. We chanted the incantation, calling on the spirits to find peace. The air grew heavy, and a sense of dread filled the room. Suddenly, the whispers stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. The temperature plummeted, and I felt a presence in the room, watching us. We continued the ritual, our voices trembling but determined. As we reached the final words, a blinding light filled the room, and the oppressive energy dissipated. When the light faded, the room was silent and still. The cold was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. The spirits had found peace, their whispers silenced forever. I knew I had done the right thing, but the experience left me with a lingering sense of unease. Riverdale Hospital returned to its routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that more dark secrets lay hidden within its walls. The spirits had been freed, but the memory of that night would haunt me forever, and I knew that if the whispers ever returned, I would be ready to face them again. Working the night shift at Vincent's hospital had always been a challenge, but it was one I embraced. I thrived in the quiet hours, the stillness allowing me to focus on my patients, but nothing could have prepared me for the encounter that left me questioning the very nature of reality. It began with a new patient, Mr. Harris, who had been admitted under mysterious circumstances. He was a quiet man, with an air of sadness that clung to him like a shadow. As I helped him settle into his room, I noticed something strange. His reflection was missing from the mirror opposite his bed. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a mere optical illusion, but no matter how I adjusted my angle, Mr. Harris's reflection remained absent. A chill ran down my spine as I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. I mentioned it to a few colleagues, but they dismissed it as a result of fatigue and overwork. Determined to find an explanation, I began to discreetly ask around about Mr. Harris. The responses I received were vague and evasive, as if everyone was trying to avoid the topic. It was clear that there was more to Mr. Harris than met the eye. One evening, as I was making my rounds, I found Mr. Harris staring at the mirror, a look of profound sorrow etched on his face. He turned to me and said, "It's the curse. It took my reflection, my soul." His voice was filled with a despair that sent shivers through me. He explained that he had been seeking help from various places, but none had been able to lift the curse. He had come to St. Vincent's in the hope that the hospital's history with the supernatural might offer a solution. His words sent a thrill of fear and determination through me. I had to help him, no matter the cost. I reached out to a local historian who specialized in the hospital's past. Together, we uncovered a dark tale of a doctor who had performed forbidden experiments, trapping souls in a mirror realm. To break the curse, we needed to perform a ritual to release the trapped souls. As we prepared for the ritual, strange occurrences plagued the hospital. Shadows moved on their own, and whispers filled the air. The final step of the ritual required confronting the mirror. With a mixture of fear and determination, I began the incantation. The air grew colder, and the room seemed to close in around us. Mr. Harris stood beside me, his face a mask of fear and hope. As I chanted the incantation, His reflection slowly began to appear in the mirror, the room filled with a blinding light, and I felt a presence, a cold, malevolent force trying to stop us. With a final agonizing scream, the force dissipated, and the room fell silent. Mr. Harris was gone, but his reflection remained in the mirror, smiling gratefully. I felt a sense of relief and fear. We had freed a soul, but the hospital's dark past was far from over. The experience left me with a sense of unease. Vincent's was haunted, not just by restless spirits, but by a darkness that refused to be banished. I knew I had only scratched the surface of the horrors that lurked within its walls, but I also knew that I would continue to fight, to uncover the truth and bring peace to the souls trapped in the hospital's dark history. The night shift at Greenwood Asylum was always filled with an eerie stillness, but nothing could have prepared me for the disappearance of patient 193. The patient, a young woman named Lily, had been admitted with severe paranoia and delusions. Despite her condition, she was calm and cooperative, making her sudden disappearance all the more baffling. One night, during a routine check, I found Lily's bed empty, the room was undisturbed, and there were no signs of struggle. Panic set in as I alerted the security staff, and a thorough search of the asylum began. Hours passed with no sign of Lily, and a sense of dread settled over me. Determined to find answers, I reviewed the security footage. To my horror, the cameras showed Lily lying in bed, then simply vanishing into thin air. Desperate for an explanation, I delved into the asylum's history and discovered a pattern of similar disappearances dating back decades. As I investigated further, I came across an old journal belonging to Dr. Caldwell, a former head of the asylum. The journal spoke of experiments to open portals to other dimensions, using the patients as unwilling subjects. Dr. Caldwell's writings grew increasingly erratic, ending with a cryptic warning: "The gateways are open, they come for the souls." Convinced that Lily's disappearance was linked to these experiments, I sought out a local expert in paranormal phenomena. Together, we discovered a hidden room beneath the asylum, filled with strange equipment and more journals detailing the experiments. In a last-ditch effort to save Lily, we conducted a ritual to close the portals. As we chanted, the room filled with a deafening roar, and shadows seemed to writhe around us. Suddenly, the air grew still, and a sense of calm washed over the asylum. Lily was found the next morning, lying in her bed as if nothing had happened. She had no memory of her disappearance, but her paranoia was gone. I knew that while we had closed the portals, the asylum's dark past would never truly be laid to rest. What other horrors lurked just beyond the veil, waiting to break through? Greenwood Asylum returned to its usual routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that more dark secrets lay hidden within its walls. The experience left me with a lingering sense of unease. Knowing that the asylum's dark history could never truly be erased, I vowed to remain vigilant, ready to face whatever horrors awaited in the shadows.